In his office, Don was seated at his desk working on the dismissal flow spreadsheet. Melissa had just stepped out to check on recess coverage. The door swung open without a knock. A voice called out, "You got a minute?" Craig stood in the doorway, arms crossed, shirt damp with sweat. Don looked up. "Sure, Craig. What's going on?" "My thermostat is still stuck at 82. I've got 20 kids melting into their desks and no airflow. I put in a maintenance request yesterday. Nothing." Don didn't stutter. He avoided eye contact with Craig. "I saw the request. It's in the queue." Craig shot him a cold stare. "The queue? Don, it's the first day. I've got kids asking if they can take their math books outside. I'm not running a greenhouse." Don leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple. "I understand, but I'm not HVAC. I've got a lot of things going on right now. I figured I would have everything sorted out, but it's not looking too good. I don't need you barging in my office and complaining about shit I can't fix." Craig stood there, hands on his hips. "And I've got a classroom full of sweaty fourth graders who can't focus. You want me to teach long division while they're sticking to their chairs?" Don stood, voice low but clipped. "Come on, Craig. I thought you were a problem-solving wizard. Open a window. Use the fans. I'll call maintenance again, but I can't fix the thermostat myself." Craig sighed loudly. "You renovated this office, didn't you? Got your own AC unit and everything. Meanwhile, I'm boiling in room 212. Don stood up. "Craig, don't start with that. You want to talk about equity, we can schedule a meeting. Right now, I need you to teach your class and trust that I'm handling the rest." Craig held his gaze for a beat, then nodded tightly. "Fine, but if a kid faints, I'm sending them here." "Don't be so dramatic, Craig. It's not the end of the world. I'll put in another request now. You just need to learn how to be patient." He turned and walked out. Don sat back down, jaw clenched, and typed, "Call maintenance, room 212, in caps on his to-do list. Melissa had made quick work of sorting through Liz's pile of files, her efficient organization skills on full display. Just as she finished up, Liz looked up from her own desk, noticing Melissa's handiwork. "Wow," Liz said, genuinely impressed. "You work fast, huh?" Melissa chuckled, closing the filing cabinet drawer with a satisfied smile. "I've got a bit of a knack for organizing things. Besides, I couldn't stand the chaos of those piles any longer." Liz laughed, leaning back in her chair. "Well, I appreciate it. My brain was starting to hurt just looking at that mess. You're a lifesaver." Melissa shrugged nonchalantly, leaning against the edge of Liz's desk. "What can I say? I thrive in organized chaos." Liz smirked, shaking her head. "Of course you do. And here I am, lost in paperwork hell most days." Don hasn't left his office yet. He is looking over the student record paperwork, trying to organize them all in his office to the best of his ability. Melissa comes in, letting him know she's taking her lunch break. Liz was getting ready to take her break too, but she wanted to wait until Melissa came back so her work would be supervised while she's gone. It was now 1 in the afternoon, and all the students had finished their lunch and recess periods. The third grade classes of Carla, Carole, and Hillary were transitioning into math class, while fourth graders moved into their special sessions. Craig's class was heading to the gym for physical education, while Susan's class was heading to the media center for library time. In the meantime, the fifth graders were currently on recess, supervised by Tanya and Miss Paddock. However, Michelle and Cara, who were supposed to be overseeing the playground, had vanished and were currently sneaking a smoke break in Michelle's car, which was parked discreetly on the other side. Cara took a long drag on her cigarette, listening to Michelle's complaints with a sympathetic expression. "Ugh, my fifth graders are driving me insane. And it's only the first day," Michelle groaned, exasperated. "They're so rowdy, and they never seem to listen." Cara exhaled a cloud of smoke, nodding in agreement. "I know what you mean. It's like they have boundless energy, and I just can't keep up." Michelle leaned her head back against the car headrest, a weary expression on her face. "It's only the first day, and I'm already at my wit's end. These kids are a handful." Cara nodded in agreement, taking a puff on her cigarette. "I hear you. I had a student who was constantly talking back during my lesson. It took all my willpower not to snap at them." Cara glanced at her watch and grimaced. "We've only got about 10 minutes left for recess. We should really get back." Michelle sighed, crushing her cigarette into the car's ashtray. "I know, but I just need a couple more minutes to vent. These kids are killing me today." Cara nodded, understanding how exhausted Michelle was feeling. "I get it. It's been a rough day, but we can't afford to get caught out here." Michelle let out a frustrated sigh. I know, but I just needed a moment to regroup and get my sanity back." Just then, they heard a faint voice calling out in the distance. "Michelle! Cara!" it said, getting closer. They both froze, recognizing the voice as Tanya's. "Oh, shit. They're looking for us," Michelle murmured, quickly stubbing out her cigarette. "We're screwed." Cara fumbled with her own cigarette, trying to dispose of it as discreetly as possible. "Quickly!" she hissed, gesturing for Michelle to get out of the car. The two of them had already been caught smoking on school grounds just last year, and they didn't want something like that to happen again. They both knew they were playing with fire and couldn't afford to get caught again. They quickly distinguished their cigarettes in the car ashtray and scurried out of the vehicle. As they walked back towards the school, trying to act nonchalant, they spotted Tanya approaching. She was looking for them, eyes darting around the playground. Cara and Michelle exchanged worried glances, trying to keep their cool as Tanya noticed them and began walking towards them. "There you are," she called out, a mix of relief and irritation evident in her voice. "I've been looking for you everywhere. What were you two doing?" Cara tried to keep her face neutral, but her heart was racing. "Oh, we were just checking something in the parking lot," she replied hesitantly. Michelle nodded, trying to play along. "Yeah, we thought we saw something suspicious out there, so we went to investigate." Tanya raised an eyebrow, clearly not entirely convinced by their explanation. "Suspicious, huh?" she repeated, her gaze lingering on them. "What exactly did you see out there in the broad daylight?" Michelle and Cara exchanged nervous glances, both racking their brains for a convincing lie. "I've dealt with lying students before," she tapped her foot. "You can't lie to me. I can see right through you." Cara and Michelle shared an anxious look, realizing that their attempt at dishonesty wasn't fooling Tanya. She was too perceptive to be misled so easily. Michelle sighed, knowing that they had to come clean. "All right, fine. We were smoking, okay? We just needed a quick smoke break to blow off steam. That's all." "Oh, I see. And I'm assuming you thought I was going to rat you out to Dawn? What kind of friend would I be if I did that?" Tanya pursed her lips. Cara and Michelle both breathed a sigh of relief, grateful that Tanya wasn't planning to expose them. "We were worried you'd get us in trouble," Cara admitted, her shoulders sagging in relief. Tanya shook her head, a mix of annoyance and understanding in her eyes. "I get it, but you really should be more careful after what happened last year. Smoking on school grounds is strictly prohibited, and I would hate to see you both get in trouble again." Yeah, we've learned our lesson since last year. No need to lecture us," Michelle snickered. "It's been a long day. You would only understand if you smoked with us." Tanya rolled her eyes, reluctantly amused by their banter. "I won't lecture you, but you know you really should find healthier stress management techniques, all right? And next time, try not to get caught. You're lucky it was me who found you and not Dawn." As soon as the clock hit 1:30, Miss Paddock blew the whistle, signaling that it was time for the students to go inside. Michelle, Cara, and Tanya all rallied up their classes in a straight line and headed indoors back to their classrooms. They moved on to special. Tanya's class had art, Michelle's class had music, and Cara's class had media. At 1:45 p.m., the other classes had moved into an afternoon read-aloud session. In the office, Liz finally had a chance to take her break. Melissa is taking charge at the front desk, supervising secretary responsibilities while she's gone. Don is in the teacher's lounge making himself a cup of coffee. As Don stood there sipping his coffee, he looked up to see Liz entering the teacher's lounge on her break. He paused for a moment, feeling a hint of awkwardness in the air as he realized he hadn't spoken to her all day. Deciding to address the situation, he set down his cup of coffee and approached her. "Hey, Liz!" A touch of unease in his voice. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" Liz turned to Dawn, her expression neutral as she nodded in acknowledgement. "Sure, what's up?" she replied, folding her arms across her chest. Dawn took a small step closer, gathering his thoughts for a moment before speaking. "I just noticed that we haven't talked much today," he began, trying to keep his tone casual. "I guess I just wanted to check in on how you're doing. The first day of school could be pretty hectic." Liz shrugged, her expression still guarded. "It's been hectic, all right. Dealing with paperwork, organizing the office, and trying to keep up with all the calls. It's been a whirlwind." Dawn nodded, sensing her guardedness. "Yeah, I can imagine. Sounds like you've got your hands full." "You're acting like this is my first day on the job," she chuckled loudly. "I know you're worried about me, but I got this. Yeah, I'm a little stressed, but I can handle it." Don nodded, a small smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "I know you can handle yourself, Liz. You've been doing this job for years, and you're damn good at it. But that doesn't mean I won't worry about you, you know?" "I worry about you too, Don. Maybe more than I need to," she admitted. Don's smirk softened at her confession. "You worry about me? I don't know if I should feel flattered or concerned." Liz couldn't help but roll her eyes playfully. "Both, maybe? You're not exactly the epitome of healthy habits, you know?" Don chuckled, running a hand through his hair. "Point taken. I guess I can be a bit of a mess sometimes." Liz raised an eyebrow, a playful glint in her eyes. A bit? You call surviving on caffeine and 3 hours of sleep a night a bit? Don shrugged, a hint of teasing in his gaze. I prefer the term dedicated and enthusiastic. Caffeine keeps me functioning, and work keeps me sane. Liz rolled her eyes again, shaking her head. Sane, right. More like on the verge of a breakdown. As Liz looks down to take another bite of her sandwich, she glances over to see Don texting away and smirking at his phone. He puts it down and walks over to the fridge for a moment. Being her nosy self, Liz tries to sneak a glance at Don's phone to see who he's texting. Marnie? She says to herself. Interesting. As Don turns around, Liz quickly focuses her attention back on her lunch, hoping that Don didn't catch her being nosy. Don couldn't help but catch Liz glancing at his phone and murmuring Marnie's name. He raised an eyebrow, a small smile playing at the corner of his lips. Interested in my phone, are you? He teased, walking back over to the table. It was obvious that he had caught her snooping, but he didn't seem bothered by it, more amused than anything. Liz felt a flush of embarrassment creep up on her cheeks, knowing she'd been caught. She quickly tried to play it off with a nonchalant shrug. Just curious, that's all. Who were you texting? Don chuckled, taking his seat back at the table. Oh, just Marnie. I was wondering how she was doing. I mean, I haven't seen her since Cara's birthday party. Liz nodded, trying to feign disinterest, even though she was secretly intrigued. She knew Marnie and Don were close, and the fact that he was texting her made her feel a pang of jealousy. But she didn't want to show it, not wanting to give him the pleasure of knowing how much it bothered her. Oh, is she doing okay? She asked casually. Don let out a sigh, running a hand through his hair. It's been a tough time for her, he said softly. I've been trying to check in on her as much as I can. Liz nodded, her expression softening. She knew how much Marnie meant to Don, and she could see the worry in his eyes as he talked about her. I'm sure she appreciates it, she said softly. She knows you care about her. Liz still had some unresolved feelings about Marnie and Rebecca. She didn't forget about the way she was treated by Marnie at her intervention and how she got into a physical fight with Rebecca at the white party. She stood up from the table in the lounge and headed back to the office. Don was still seated at the table, smiling at his phone. He didn't acknowledge Liz when she left. The day was slowly winding down. Don was happy that the day was almost over. The time was now 2:45 p.m. and all classes were moving into their afternoon read-aloud session. Then they were going to hand out homework and planners. In the office, Liz was describing to Melissa how dismissal usually works. She printed out a handout that showed the teacher's schedules. So, parent pickup meets in the gym. The students will walk down the hall and head into the gym. There is usually one teacher for each grade. Once the parents have arrived, they sign their student out on the clipboard and then they can leave, Liz explained. Today, Tanya, Carla, and Craig are on duty. They meet in the gym right at 3:20 p.m. The front doors will open and the parents will be allowed in the gym. Melissa nodded her head, glancing down at the schedule, and then back up at Liz. Walkers usually get going around 3:30 p.m. Mr. Foster and Miss Paddock will stand with them in the front courtyard and make sure everyone crosses the street and leaves the school safely. And then there's bus duty. Susan, Hillary, and Carole wait in the hallway with the students for their bus to arrive. The students are not allowed to leave the school until their bus gets here. The teachers are supposed to supervise. Liz nodded, handing her a copy. This schedule is subject to change every week, but for now, Don wants to keep the same schedule going for the first month of school just to develop a bit of a routine. When the clock hits 3:25, I usually page and say, all students who are being picked up, please head to the gym. And for walkers, I say, all walkers, you may now make your way to the front entrance of the school. Students who take the bus are allowed to walk down the hallway at 3:15 p.m., Liz finished. Sounds pretty easy and straightforward, Melissa nodded. Don watched Liz explaining the dismissal procedure to Melissa. He couldn't help but notice how efficient and organized she was, and he admired her ability to handle the job. He glanced at his phone, checking the time and noticing that dismissal was approaching. He stood up from the table, straightening out his clothes. He made his way out of the lounge and towards the front doors, ready to greet the parents for pickup. So, now all we have to do is wait. We got about 20 minutes until dismissal, but I just wanted to explain everything to make sure you have the idea, Liz nodded firmly. Melissa smiled and nodded. I think I get the gist of it. Thanks for explaining everything, Liz. You make this job look easy. Liz chuckled softly, a hint of humor gleaming in her eyes. Trust me, it's not always this smooth, but we've got this. Just follow my lead and we'll have these kids picked up and out the door in no time, she assured, her confident smile putting Melissa at ease. As dismissal time arrived, Liz and Melissa took their positions in the hallway, watching as the students filed out of their classrooms. She already paged for the parent pickup students. Liz kept a watchful eye on the clock, waiting for the cue to dismiss the walkers. At 3:25 p.m., she picked up the phone and spoke into it. "All walkers, you may now make your way to the front entrance of the school." With the announcement made, Liz placed the microphone back into its holder, watching as the students made their way down the hallway, heading towards the front doors. As they passed, she wished them a good afternoon, offering smiles and high fives as they passed. Once the hallway became empty, she took in a deep breath, knowing that the more chaotic part of the afternoon was about to start. She glanced at Melissa, a small smirk on her face. "Ready for parent pickup?" Melissa nodded her head confidently, though the hint of nervousness was evident in her eyes. "As ready as I'll ever be." Liz chuckled, patting her on the shoulder lightly. "Don't worry, it won't be too bad. Just remember to smile and keep the parents happy." As if on cue, the sound of car engines could be heard in the distance, signaling the arrival of the first parents. "Showtime," Liz smirked. Dawn opened the front doors, and out came the parents flooding the hallways. The two of them remained stationed at the entrance, greeting the stream of parents as they made their way into the school. Liz offered smiles and warm welcomes to each parent that walked through the door, while Melissa smiled and nodded, following Liz's lead. The chaos started to intensify as more and more parents arrived, causing a bit of congestion in the small space. Liz kept her composure, her smile never faltering as she managed the crowd. With the last of the parents having entered the school, Liz looked over at Melissa, giving her a nod of reassurance. "You're doing great," she mouthed. Meanwhile, the teachers began to make their way to their designated areas, ready to monitor the dismissal of the students and keep the process running smoothly. Tanya, Carla, and Craig made their way to the gym, ready to oversee the pickup of the students. Foster and Paddock headed to the front of the school, standing ready to supervise the walkers. As the minutes ticked by, the students began to grow antsy, their impatience growing with each passing second. A few of them fidgeted and shifted from side to side, their eyes glued to the door. A couple of them started whispering amongst themselves, their voices just loud enough for the supervisors to hear. Susan shot them a worrying glance, her eyes narrowing in a silent threat. Suddenly, the faint sound of a bus approaching could be heard, the sound growing louder gradually. The bus gradually pulled up to the curb and came to a stop, the brakes letting out a loud squeak. Susan waited a moment to make sure the bus was fully parked before giving the all clear. "All right, you can go," she said, her hand slowly moving from the door. The students rushed forward, pushing and shoving each other in their desperation to get on the bus. Some of them stumbled and tripped on their way, but they quickly got back up, their focus solely on getting onto the bus. The students filed onto the bus in a noisy, chaotic fashion. Susan watched the students board, her gaze sharp as she counted them off in her head to make sure no one was left behind. Once the last student was finally on the bus, she nodded to herself, satisfied. With the first bus now on its way, Susan, Hillary, and Carole stood waiting for the remaining two buses to arrive. The students who were left behind seemed even more restless now, their impatience palpable. "How long is it going to take for the other buses to get here?" one student grumbled. "I want to go home already." "Patience," Susan said firmly, her expression stern. "The other buses will get here when they get here. You just have to wait a little bit longer." The students groaned in frustration, some of them slouching back against the wall, while others continued to fidget anxiously. A few more minutes passed, and the sound of another bus approaching could be heard. The students perked up, their eyes widening with anticipation. However, Susan once again held up her hand, signaling them to wait. "Not yet," she said, shaking her head. "You all need to wait until the bus is fully parked." The other bus finally pulled up and parked, and after a moment, Susan gave the all-clear signal. The students surged forward, practically shoving each other out of the way as they ran towards the waiting bus. Some of them stumbled over each other, their legs getting tangled together as they scrambled to get on board. Once again, Susan watched as the students rushed onto the bus, counting them off as they each filed inside. Soon, all the students had boarded, and the bus pulled away from the curb, leaving behind an empty school driveway. When the last bus departed, Susan, Hillary, and Carole all went back to their classrooms to clean up and prepare for tomorrow. Meanwhile, in the gym, there were only a couple of students left to be picked up. As Michelle, Cara, and Tanya finished tidying up their respective classrooms, the hallways grew gradually silent, the noise and commotion of the day fading away. The only sound that remained was the occasional tapping of feet or shuffling of papers.